In a continuation to part one, I spoke with Judith Lee, and this time we chatted specifically about our own battles with NRD, the National Registration Department. But before that, I wanted to share my own issues that I had with NRD. The year was 2019, and I had just finished a grueling master's program in cultural studies in London. Excitedly, I was looking forward to the end of my studies so that I could do some traveling around Europe. But then I realized that my passport was actually expiring in less than 6 months and that I had to get it renewed in the Malaysian High Commission in London. The next day, I gave them a call and they mentioned that I needed to fill up a form to confirm my details. Upon receiving the website link from them, I double checked my personal detail, and much to my surprise, my race had actually been changed to Chinese. As a second generation Chin, I had automatically followed the race of my father, who was classified as Indian in his IC and birth cert. I guess my personal view is that people should be able to self-identify however they feel comfortable, as racial identity can be a complex issue. In Malaysia, however, there is still this outdated thinking that you need to follow your father's race in official documents like your IC. That to me stems from a patriarchal type of thinking whereby the race of the mother is deemed not important enough for a person to consider in their racial identity. In the United States, for instance, they have allowed their citizens to take as many racial categories as they want, and closer to home, our neighbor Singapore has allowed parents of newborn to tick 2 racial boxes since 2010. Now, growing up in Malaysia, I've of course heard of many horror stories about parents and individuals having a hard time adding the race of the mother in the system. Apparently, the NRD computer system immediately rejects your form, and you are forced to tick only one racial tick box. On top of that, filling up your forms physically over the NRD counter will not guarantee any consistent results either. Oftentimes, it depends on which NRD officer you get. Some are extremely particular with this racial tick box issue, insisting that you must follow your father, while I've heard anecdotally of other JPN officers who are more lenient to allow you to tick the race of your mother instead of your father. So coming back to my form at the Malaysian High Commission in London, I then inquired and asked why my race has been changed. The officer mentioned that all this information came directly from JPN and they had no say in updating or changing any of the information at their office. She also said that if I wanted to change any detail, I would need to bring up the issue at NRD office in Malaysia. So fast forward 6 months, I came back to Malaysia just in the nick of time as COVID-19 hit Malaysia. I made an appointment at an NRD office to get an updated IC. And so while I was there, I told the officer about the issue of race change on my passport, right? And he then mentioned that for me to change it back to Indian, I would need to fill out a form, then appeal for that change. Puzzled, I then asked him, how is it that throughout my life I've been categorized as Indian, and so how on earth did that change to Chinese? He even had the nerve to ask me to consult my father, as perhaps he might have requested that change. I told him that my father had actually passed away in 2013, and he would not have done anything without consulting me. And besides, I guess, aren't there privacy laws prohibiting such actions to take place? So this begs the question then, how did my race change from Indian to Chinese when I had never requested it? I kind of wondered if an overzealous NRD officer had looked at my photo and thought, well, I could not possibly be Indian, and then took it upon themselves to change it to Chinese without my consent, I'm just wondering what other possibilities could there be. I then investigated this further and came across a recent case in March 2021 whereby an interracial couple, Joachim Thailand, who is Indian, and his wife Elizabeth Joseph, who is Dusun, were left confused and shocked after their 2 children, whose ethnicities were registered as Dusun in their birth certificate, were labeled as Indian in more recent official documentation. And according to the story and the vibes, they were in the process of registering their eldest son for school via the Education Ministry's online system when they found out that the system had listed their son's race as Indian. And so when Joachim contacted the ministry on this matter, he was told that the ministry is unable to revert the statuses as the information comes directly from NRD. And so till today, we have not had an update about this case and how confidential information of his children and even my information in my case were changed without consent. So that was my story. And so, in my conversation with Judith Lee, I asked her to go more into detail about her own experiences and dilemma with NRD. Have a listen.
Back in 2008, I was 17 at that time. I realized that my birth certificate had gone missing and I needed it to apply for scholarship for tertiary education. So I told my mom, hey, my birth certificate is not where it's supposed to be. So we said, okay, we're going to go to JPN and get that sorted. So we went on a Thursday, I think, took her number, we sat down. And when it came to our turn, I told the lady what had happened and she asked for my IC and I gave it to her. And on my IC, it stated that I'm Chinese. So I gave her my IC and she typed a few things on her computer. And then she said, okay, wait for 5 minutes. I'll get back to you. So I sat down, waited. And then she called me again. I went over, I took my birth cert and I was just going through all the details to be sure. And then when it came to my race, it had stated that I was listed as an Indian. And I just gently nudged her and I said, hey, this is wrong. I'm actually listed as Chinese over here. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, but you don't look Chinese. I said, yes, I don't look Chinese, but my dad is Chinese. My surname is Chinese. And she just refused to listen to me. And she said, no, nowadays, birth certificate, you can follow mother also. I got really confused because I had not heard about this at that time. I kind of told her, I said, look, it's kind of off if my birth certificate is Indian and my IC was Chinese, and I didn't want there to be any other consequences or trouble in the future, So I wanted her to correct it. And then she started yelling at me. She started saying, no, you are Indian. And that was when my mother, who came along, she came up to the counter and she looked at the lady and she said, hey, my daughter is Chinese. And then she looked at my mother and she said, yeah, but you're Indian. And my mother said, it doesn't matter. I want her to be listed as Chinese. The thing about this whole situation is not that I'm embarrassed about being listed as Indian. It was nothing to do with that. It was more of the fact that they changed my race without even telling me about it. And then her superior came into the conversation, and because she had heard, my mom kind of yelling at her and her yelling back, and the superior came over and she asked, what's going on? So I explained to the superior what had happened, and her superior actually looked at her and said, change it. And she got really frustrated and she said, yeah, but it's very difficult. And the superior said, it's not difficult to change. And in the first place, why did you yourself change it in the first place? And then she looked at me and she said, oh, it's 10 ringgit to change and reprint your birth certificate. I said, you know what, it doesn't matter. It's fine. I gave her the 10 ringgit and she started mumbling and she was really frustrated with the whole situation. And she literally threw my birth certificate on the counter. And she said, nah. I took it and that was that. We walked out of JPN that day, a bit shaken and a bit upset about what had happened. My mom decides to email them, to which they just sent an apology note saying, oh, we're so sorry this had happened. And that was the end of the conversation. So nothing had been done. I'm not sure if the officer had been reprimanded. There was no update on that, but that was that. Fast forward to 2016, I had changed my IC because my chip was faulty. So I got it changed. I think going through the whole 2008 situation with my birth cert, I didn't think it would happen again. Unfortunately, it did. So I changed it on 2016, but I only realized it in 2017 when I had to get my son's birth certificate done. So again, we went to JPN, took our number, gave the officer our details, mine and my husband's IC. She took everything down, didn't really ask us any questions, just said, oh, okay, your son was born in which hospital? So that was it. So we sat down, waited for about 10 minutes or so. She called us up. And that was when I took the birth certificate and I was reading through everything again. Deja vu, I see my race listed as Indian. And I tell myself, oh my goodness, this cannot be happening to me again. And I asked her, I said, excuse me, I'm sorry, but why is my race listed as Indian over here? And she said, no, actually, this is what is stated in your IC. Because again, I never knew this because obviously they don't state your race in the IC. I said, okay, but how do I change it? Because I want my race to be listed as Chinese in my son's birth certificate. And she said, you have to go to the IC department, change your IC, and then come back. Those were the details that she gave me. That was it. So I honestly thought it was as simple as that. So the following month, I had gone over to get my IC changed. I had specifically told the lady to show me her computer screen and prove to me that I was listed as Chinese. And she said, okay. So she showed it to me. Everything was all right. My IC was given to me. I went back to the birth certificate area and spoke to the officer, and I told the officer, okay, can I change it now? Because my IC states that I'm Chinese now. And that's when she gives me 2 forms saying, oh, you have to swear in court. You need the commissioner of oaths. You need, I think there were about 6 or 7 list of items that I had to provide as proof. And I asked her, I said, the last month when I came home, colleague didn't tell me this. And she said, oh, ya ke? Oh, but this is the procedure. And I said, how long would it take? So it would take 3 to 6 months. And I think when I heard that whole ordeal, I just told myself, you know what, forget it lah. Just, it's fine, So my son's birth cert, I'm still Indian over there. And again, I would like to go back to just a matter of the officers changing it without telling you what it is. That was what upset me more.
Thanks for sharing that incident.
You're welcome.
I think quite a few people, Indians, I think, have sort of also gone through this experience. Kind of last words, how Malaysia should navigate this issue of racial identity and classification for mixed race Malaysians like us?
I think the government should really let the people decide what they want to label themselves as. Once this happens, not make it so difficult for us to want to change it, especially if the officers themselves, decide to change it as on a whim. I also feel there should be better SOPs or better systems where the officers should really show us their screens and, ask us if everything is in order before they process an application. And they should not be given authorization to change details without our consent to kind of navigate the racial identity. I feel this might be a little controversial to say, but I think that by abolishing the whole Bumi rights gives us all a sense of equality and unity, because I feel like with the Bumi rights, there's already a segregation. We're already segregated by race in Malaysia. And with the Bumi rights, it's segregated even further. But when you label us all as Malaysians, there's no race. Everyone has equal footing. There's no prejudice. We're all Malaysians. That's it. I remember there was one time where I went to Australia and I had met some friends over there. Well, an Australian friend actually asked me, oh, so where are you from? And I said, Malaysia. And said, oh, so you're Malay. I said, no, I'm Chinese Indian from Malaysia. And then she asked me, how does that work? Aren't Malaysians Malay? So, with people looking at us that way, and when you explain to people, oh no, in Malaysia, we have all these different races, all these different religions and identities, right? But other people don't get it, because for them, it's like, oh, we're Australians, we're Americans, we're Germans. There's just it. And I think the same should be applied to us as well. We should be Malaysians. That's it.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this 2-part interview with Judith Lee about the complexities of mixed race Malaysians.